Donald Trump has been trying to fight against Islamic extremism in his own way. Surely the RCMP commissioner and the police in Montreal would arrest him in a heartbeat for Islamophobia if they could. But he is trying to address a serious issue, which is how do you separate the wolves from the lambs, or at least the wolves from the non-rabid wolves? I don't know how you choose what Muslims to let into America and which ones are too dangerous. Joining us now via Skype is a man who has spent some time thinking about this, our friend Dr. Daniel Pipes, who's the boss of the Middle East Forum, and he wrote a new piece. It's just amazing. It's called Smoking Out Islamists Via Extreme Vetting, and it's in the new issue of the Middle East Quarterly. Dr. Pipes, great to see you again. Let's start with the obvious question. Why should immigration departments in Canada or the United States try to screen out Islamists? Should they even try?
Well, yes, they should. In the United States, we had a law dating from 1951 or 2 called the McCarran Act, which excluded communists. Communists were the great threat of that era. Islamists are the great threat of this era. We want to exclude them. Canada wants to exclude them. Everybody wants to exclude them. The question is how. Now, the Trump administration initially has the right idea, which is to exclude them, but went about it in a less than satisfactory way, because what it did is focused in on countries, on nationalities. And I might say from an American perspective that there are plenty of Iranians and Libyans who are very friendly to us, and plenty of Canadians who are a threat to us. Mm-hmm. So you can't do it by country. You have to do it by individual. And that's what I propose doing in my analysis.
Yeah, well, I've just been going through it. It's a very meticulous piece because it's tough, and I want to refer to a proposed list of questions that were drafted. I mean, you refer to them at length in your article by a Danish parliamentarian of Syrian Muslim background. He drafted up a bunch of questions to put.
No. He was one of the sources that I used for this. No, the questions are mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad you clarified that.
Well,
okay, well, thank you for clarifying. Yeah. Let's talk about these questions, because to ask them is a detailed process. To answer them is a revealing process, but to process the answers and make a decision, that is a technical job that I would put it to you, your typical TSA mall cop is not skilled to do. We're going to get into the questions in a minute, but You're talking about a complete overhaul, one-to-one meetings that would take hours, I imagine, of deep screening. Right. So you're not just a rubber stamp, did you fill out Form A? Oh, where's your Form A? You're talking about a whole revamp, aren't you?
Right. I'm comparing this to getting a security clearance to work for the government in some sensitive area. In that case, the government wants to know who you are, who your family is, who your friends are, who your other associations are, what your background is, what your career is, what your hobbies are, where you've been to, and the like. To give you one example, I applied to be a Foreign Service officer in the State Department, and as I understand it, my application was held up for 8 months because I spent an afternoon in East Berlin, communist East Berlin at the time. That was a very important fact. So along those same lines, I would like our immigration authorities to look very carefully at who is coming in many ways, but in particular, and my specialty is in terms of the Islamist ideology. How does this person relate to the Islamist ideology? And the interviews and the research should be all designed to ferret that out.
Yeah. You know, I remember when I applied, certainly nothing like a Foreign Service exam or top secret clearance, but I applied just for what's called Nexus. That's this speedy border pass if you want to go between Canada and the United States. Not only did I have to be fingerprinted for the first time in my life, but I had to answer a number of questions that felt along those lines. They were fairly invasive, and the whole process took hours in person and months of paperwork. I suppose if I want to be able to go to the United States and have to present and have a personal meeting, why shouldn't someone from a dangerous place from a religion there 10, 20, 30% of people are radical, why shouldn't they go through that too? I mean, in Canada, Doctor, I've learned that only 10% of applicants to immigrate to Canada ever meet face-to-face with some sort of security or immigration officer at all. 90% of the applicants to Canada, it's all done, paperwork, desk, stamps, check out the box. They never even meet anyone. What's it like in the States? Is it
Well,
similar?
that's not taking it seriously. And I suggest that if we want to protect ourselves, we have to spend the money and the time to really find and be invasive. This is, after all, voluntary undertaking. You don't have to get a Nexus Visa, whatever you might call it, and the person doesn't have to come to Canada or the United States. But if they choose to, then that means they're willing to undergo this process. I would video it. I would tell the person that it's being videoed, that it could be made public. I would invite the person back for repeat questioning, so that, say, 6 months later, I'd ask the same question as I had. It's much harder to lie, as we all know, than to tell the truth, because you forget what you said.
Yeah.
I would make it very rigorous.
You know, can I go through some of your questions? And I'm sorry I misunderstood the source of these questions. I'm glad you corrected me. I just want to pull a few of them at random. There's a lot of questions here. To answer them, and I could imagine any one of them could set off a detailed discussion. I'm just going to pull a few questions at random, and maybe you can tell me what kind of answer you think would be a flag, like your visit to East Berlin. So I'm just going to pick one here. What do you think of disestablishing religion, that is, separating mosque and state? That's an interesting one. I mean, we love the phrase separation of church and state. How do you think someone would answer that question? And if they got it wrong, is there a wrong answer there?
Well, there is a wrong answer, because we do believe in separation of religious institutions and state. And someone who said, no, I want my religion to be dominant in the state, would be setting off alarm bells, for me anyway. But this is not someone we want. This is someone who does not accept our constitutional order. That, I think, is the basis. We have a constitutional order. Now, there's a great deal of debate within the constitutional order. That's why we have parliaments and congresses. It doesn't stay static. Things are happening all the time. But there is an order which we all accept. If you take an oath of office, what do you say? You say you accept the constitutional order. Mm-hmm. So if someone comes in saying, basically, I don't accept one of the fundamentals of this constitutional order, then I would say that's a person we don't want.
Well, let me go back to your earlier premise that I accepted without blinking, but now I want to ask. I said, should we screen out Islamists? And you said, well, yes, we do in both countries, Canada and the United States. But I don't know if Justin Trudeau, let alone his echo chamber at the CBC, or any of the establishment, I don't know if they would say that believing in the dominance, or, the supremacy of Sharia law is disqualifying. I don't think they would, if there was someone in front of Justin Trudeau who said, I believe in the Quran, I do not believe in the order of civil law, I do not believe in separation of mosque and state. I mean, we have a phenomenon all over Canada, I see it, of Muslim men refusing to stand for the Canadian anthem, which I think is a symbol of their refusal to accept separation of mosque and state. I don't think Justin Trudeau would say they should be kept out. I don't think he would say that at all.
I don't think he would either. No, what he would be focusing on is violence. Is this a person who might undertake violence? And so long as that violent potential isn't discerned, the person is welcome. The left tends to focus just on violence. I focus on the ideas behind the violence that might lead to violence and might lead to other forms of subversion. They don't have to be violent. They can be cultural. Yeah. They can be religious. They can be in the school system, in the court system, in the parliament. So I take a much wider view. For me, it's not a war on terror. A war on terror would be analogous to the Second World War in the United States. We had Pearl Harbor, right? It would be a war against surprise attacks. No, it wasn't a war against surprise attacks. It was a war against fascism. This is a war against Islamism.
Yeah. Let me read more of your questions. Is it a good idea for men to shut their wives and daughters at home? And you also suggest, does a husband have the right to hit his wife if she is disobedient? You have a series of questions about marriage and divorce, including about polygamous marriages. I won't go through all of them. They're very interesting. Justin Trudeau fancies himself a feminist. He never stops mentioning it. He went to Davos and mentioned it. He was very showy about appointing 50% of his cabinet women. But I've never heard him talk about that in a mosque. In fact, he recently went to a mosque in Ottawa. Obviously, it was gender segregated. And he said, and hello to the sisters upstairs. And so I think that, I mean, he's so showy.
Well, feminism is for some of us, but not all of us. And being Muslim trumps having gender equality is what you're getting at.
You know, I mean, these are interesting questions, and I think the problem is when we try and vet Muslim migrants, and we have spent more than a year trying to get the Canadian government to release their questionnaire of Syrian migrants. In the end, they have simply refused to do that. Think about that. The Canadian government refuses to release the questionnaire of Syrian migrants. The Syrian migrants have seen the questionnaire, so there's no secret to them. They can, I suppose, radio back home and say this or don't say that. But ordinary citizens can't know what it is. I don't know the value of doing a records search or a database search in a failed state like Syria or Somalia, where records either don't exist or could be forged or compromised. So if you're trying to find out if someone has a history of violence, you probably won't find it.
That's going to be hard.
But as you point out, that's not even the thing. If someone checks every box, I believe in a medieval culture, I believe in Muslim supremacy, I believe in the submission and subordination of women, I don't believe in separation of mosque and state, I don't believe in the rights of non-Muslim minorities, so many great questions here. Do you accept that Muslims were responsible for the 9/11 attacks? Just, conspiracy theorists and anti-social attitudes. None of this will show up if you do a database check, and yet this is the petri dish in which Islamic violence or just slow Islamization takes root. Let me ask you this. Any chance that this will even be considered by the Trump administration? Have you had any, I don't know if you're at liberty to tell me, have you had any inquiries or invitations to submit ideas to the Trump administration?
I have had a bit of response from people now in government, but as you're probably aware, the Trump administration is a bit chaotic, so we won't expect too much of it too quickly. However, if you do notice at the bottom of the page, this is at my website, danielpipes.org, and it's the most recent article, Smoking Out Islamists via Extreme Vetting. If you notice, I added an update where I provide questions coming from none other than the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, that they got from people being asked questions at the border, and they're pretty good. Mm-hmm. They're not as extensive as mine, but they're good.
Yeah,
and that came from just a few days before the Trump administration reached office. So it looks like in the United States there are something like these questions being asked anyway. I can't vouch for it, but it looks like it.
Let me throw a question.
So maybe it's pushing an open door.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I hope you're right, and I think you're right. I think that these terrorist-infested countries, Somalia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, I think we should be extremely cautious. But I agree with you, there are some liberals, there are some lambs as opposed to wolves, some allies even, but we have to discern it. But I also agree with your counterpoint that someone can come from a country that's not hostile, someone can even look, dress Western, not be in a niqab. Let me ask just one last question. This is so interesting, folks. You heard the man. Go to danielpipes.org, or you can see it in the Middle East Quarterly. Here's a question that the Council of American Islamic Relations says one of their people was asked. And I like it because it just starts an interesting conversation. Why did you shave your beard? Because so many of the Muslim migrants who went to Europe, they had the long ISIS-style beard, like the ZZ Top-style beard. They all shaved to look younger, more modern, more Western to get in, and then they grew it back. And I love that question, why did you shave your beard? It doesn't have any prejudice within it. It just asks a question that could probably stimulate a very
it's a
interesting
clever question.
Answer.
Yeah. Clever question. Wish I thought of it.
Let me ask one last question. Donald Trump, you can criticize his executive order that now 2 courts have tried to oppose. Is there any way to close the door on Islamists? that will not be overturned by the deep state, by the establishment, by liberal, multicultural judges or administrations or systems. I mean, I don't even know if it's possible that a government...
I have no doubt it is possible. It is possible. Look, that immigration order was ineptly done. It didn't consult with the legal experts, with the people in the business. It just was off the cuff. It's like a campaign promise come true. Okay, we said we'd do it, now we're doing it. I hope it's a lesson for the new president and his team that you can't do this off the cuff. You can't do it incompetently. You have to prepare. You have to go through and get it vetted and all the rest. And then it will go through the courts. I've no doubt. So I hope this is a lesson. I hope they learn from this.
Well, listen, I've sure enjoyed this conversation. Once again, the article is called Smoking Out Islamists Via Extreme Vetting. You can find it on danielpipes.org. You can read the whole thing in the Middle East Quarterly. I hope some of these questions will be taken up by the Trump administration, but I know, Dr. Pipes, I know that not only will this not be done in Canada, it would not be, but that rather Justin Trudeau would not regard wrong answers to these questions as a barrier, even if he had those facts.
Well, wait a few years, it might change.
Yeah, could be. All right, great to talk to you. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.